Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms Monsters Radio. Thanks for joining me. I want to welcome all new listeners and members to the channel, as well as first-timers in the chat. So tonight, we're going to talk about insectoids. What are insectoids? Are they extraterrestrial? Possibly multidimensional beings? You know, most reports that I receive concentrate on praying mantis-like entities with human or anthropoid characteristics. But there have been a few, like the Mothman, that resemble other species of insects. Now, many abduction experiencers recall seeing tall insectoid beings during their ordeal. Now, these beings, in most cases, seem to hold an overlord status, directing the other alien entities into discharging their duties. But their malevolence toward the abductee is usually inhuman and oppressive. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off with an account that I recently posted from the Chicago metro area. Now, some of you may recall that we received several unusual humanoid, insectoid, and alien-like creature reports from the Chicagoland during this multi-year investigation of the Chicago Mothman phenomena. In this case, a witness from Harwood Heights, Illinois, called into Coast to Coast AM with his flying insectoid encounter. Was this another winged humanoid related to Chicago sightings? I don't know if it was or not. We didn't put it as part of the group, but it could very well have been. So he states, I was coming back from work in the summer of 2014, about 1:30 in the morning. I pulled up in the driveway and something caught the side of my eye. I walked up the stairs and went to the window. I live on the second floor. I looked out to the window to across the street and saw a cryptid, if you will, a Mothman type insectoid, small body, unusually large head, normal, no red eyes, and it kept staring in my direction. I went to make tea, fed the cats, came back, rubbed my eyes to see if I was tired and seeing things, and sure enough, it was still there. Now, one important thing, there was no foreboding fear, none whatsoever. That I found interesting. I was shocked, as many people as possible had seen similar things. I went several times and checked. I'd say 4 or 5 times, just peering outside, looking at the window, and it just stood there. Now, I live in a small town near Chicago. I figured the police would do the rounds or someone would see it. It's a very small community. Sure enough, no one was around. So it did not faze me to take a picture. I did have a smartphone at the time, but overall, no fear, and absolutely, you're just there in shock because you just can't believe what you're seeing. You listen to accounts, but you never think you will be in that situation. I went back several times. I was listening to your show that night, by the way, peering out every now and then. It just kept standing there. Now, in the morning, I went to see any trace of anything. It was gone. So, yeah, above all, I would say it was the strangest thing. But I wasn't afraid at all. It shocks me to even say that now. Now, thinking back over the several months and years, I talked to friends. They have an interest in it. I keep thinking it was crouching like a runner would be, so it could have been taller than what we claim or what I claimed. It could have easily been 6 or 7 foot. It was almost as if definitely the body was much smaller and the head came to a point, almost as if, you know, the old cartoons from Mad Magazine, Spy versus Spies, and the nose, if you will, comes out like a parrot's or a bird beak, but there's no beak. So it's very kind of pointed, protruding face, if you will. But again, there were no eyes, there were no facial features, but again, this humanoid design that there the face would be where a face would be, of course. So yeah, but the head was much bigger than the body. So of course, this was much different than the reports we've been getting. I guess just by seeing this small body and large head, as odd as it was, I wasn't going to go outside and even look outside. I felt safe at home, hoping that it might not see me looking at it in the window. Now, I had to ask if this was related to the Chicago Mothman. During our investigation of this phenomenon, like I've said before, we've had a variety of other humanoid sightings reported throughout Chicagoland. This location was about 1 mile southeast of O'Hare International, so it's an area where we have had sightings. Anyway, so let's get started with the accounts, and we'll be talking about a few of the stories and reports I've received over the years.
Of phantoms and monsters. They exist among us, and sometimes they win. Even the devil was an angel once. The world has its own rules, and these rules are not human. Some of us seek answers to the origin and existence of cryptids and the unexplained. Join us as we venture beyond the known and accepted boundaries. Welcome to our nightmare. I think you're going to like it.
So, before I go any further, again, I want to mention that this channel is made possible by you clicking on the subscribe and like buttons, and you by sharing our programming. Super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. The Buy Me a Coffee link is also shown below, so thanks for your consideration. Your comments are always welcomed. Tell me what accounts you find interesting in the presentation or suggestions for upcoming shows. I want to again thank our chat moderators, Bernadette, Marla, Mike, and Thomas, for their commitment to this channel and to me. Now, if you're in the chat and you have questions, please use all caps, and I will try to get to each one after the presentation. So, this first account, a possible victim of an alien abduction recalls his encounter with an insectoid creature and the obvious marks on his body after the event. It says, "Hi, I was first a victim of sleep paralysis over a year or so. The last incident happened while I was an inpatient at Butler Hospital in Rhode Island, seeking help with an ongoing problem. I finally saw a humanoid with an insectoid-looking head, something like a man-praying mantis, I suppose. It climbed on top of my chest and crouched there face-to-face for a minute or so, I suppose, before it faded away. Then, when I was finally able to move, I reported what I'd seen to the nurse's station immediately. I was totally freaked out at the point, and it was thankfully my last aware incident of sleep paralysis. Now, that was 2006, 2007. At this point, although I have psoriasis, I now have many scoop marks on my legs that I can't explain medically. I had a recent encounter with an entity that manifested in my apartment. It was like a plasma ball that changed into and seemed to be struggling to keep the shape of a demon-looking shape of plasma. I was able to photograph that, and I had to submit it at some point, and I will say I never did get it. Not long after, my wife called 911 because I was feeling very ill. And when I got to the ER, I was possessed by something. It was speaking through me, controlling me as I ranted about imminent global disaster and humans were like a cancer on the planet, and we had little time left. I don't recall everything I said, but it wasn't my words. Something maniacal had hijacked me. However, I felt the emotions like there was a hostile takeover happening soon. I don't know how long this went on before I slowly regained control of myself. Nothing like this has ever happened to me before or since, but I felt violated inside my head or something. I'd love to see the security video from Roger Williams Hospital's ER. Now, while undergoing medical tests for nasal bleeding on March 25th, 2017, and after a year of what I thought were isolated problems, I fear I'm an abduction victim. Now that I've been looking for answers, it seems to fit others' experience of abduction and contact. Now, my head CT scan was unremarkable. The blood work showed lower hemoglobin and lower red blood cell count. I'm awaiting a GI appointment now. So, in summary, after all these things that I swear to be true, I've concluded that Occam's razor theory that I must be a victim of alien abduction syndrome and don't know where to turn for help. Now, my wife has just recently started to report some funky stuff too, and now fear for both of us and all kind of that matter. These aren't friendly encounters I described. Thanks for your time, and I look forward to any advice. Now, I did have a private conversation with this experiencer, and I answered both of their questions the best I could. So, quite frankly, after I talked to them, actually a couple times, I didn't hear anything after them. I never received any photographs, so I don't know what to make of that. But they did seem sincere when I talked to them. Now, this next account, during a family birthday celebration near Mothman, Texas, an unknown craft is seen hovering outside. Soon afterward, two praying mantis humanoids appear in front of the witnesses. Hello, sir. This incident occurred in the late winter of 2009 at our home in West Texas. We were having a family friends get-together to celebrate a birthday. During the celebration, two of my nephews and a niece came tearing into the house, screaming at the top of their lungs, saying that a plane crashed in one of the adjacent pastures. My brother, myself, and about 3 others walked outside to see what was causing all the ruckus. Now, we didn't see anything out of the ordinary except a strange burning smell that actually smelled like burning mesquite. We didn't think anything of it since it was kind of nippy and someone could have been burning some wood in their fireplace. We told them to show us where they saw the plane go down, and we walked over to the place that they showed us. Now, the first thing we noticed was that all the dogs in the area were going bonkers. They were barking up a storm like they were all seeing the same thing. The area we live in is pretty much a rural community, except unless you live in the city of Mothman, Texas. Many of the houses are set on large plots of land, usually 4 to 5 acres per house. Although you can see the houses of many of our neighbors, and we do have traffic on the road, you do get the feeling of being all alone by yourself out there. Now, some of the land by our house is overrun by wild mesquite trees. Only a small portion of the land surrounding the house is cultivated and cleared out. Beyond the stand of trees runs a small barbed wire fence that separates us from our neighbors, who I could see were home from the lights in the house. So we walked around the edge of the trees, not wanting to really go into the stand at night. Even though it is technically winter, there could be rattlesnakes seeking shelter in amongst the trees, not to mention that mesquite trees have some wicked thorns that protrude from them. They're usually razor sharp and quite capable of punching through a pair of jeans or boots, and they hurt like hell. Now, as we looked around, we started noticing a sort of electrical charge to the very air around us, almost like the kind you feel when you approach a large electrical substation or a charged or active radio antenna. Now, as we made our way around the trees, one of my brothers noticed some light peeking through the trees. I told him it was probably one of the neighbors leaving or coming home. He promptly told me that it couldn't be headlights because the lights seemed to be diffused and not as concentrated as a car's headlight. So we moved around, and as we cleared the stand of trees, we were shocked to see an oval-shaped object hovering, maybe 4 to 5 foot off the ground. We stood there in total shock. I can only imagine that our jaws are probably on the ground. Now, as we stood there watching this object hover, without any sound, I took note that the object was maybe about 30 to 40 feet from front to back. It was maybe the same dimensions around. The object seemed to be of highly polished material that reflected the area around it. Now, the reflection of the distant street lights from the surrounding neighborhood properties seemed to reflect off the surface of the object. There was also a small dull glow to the object, barely noticeable unless you were really looking, almost like an aura of sorts, an iridescent blue of sorts. Now, as we stood there in total shock, my brother next to me expressing his disbelief, we saw two strange-looking men appear from around the object. They at first didn't notice us. They were busy running around and gathering objects from the ground from the trees. They didn't seem to notice us at first. They looked to be about the size of my oldest nephew, about 4 foot tall, but they looked very skinny, like they had no meat on their bones. Their heads were large and their arms were long, skinny, and hung down around their knees. Now, about this time, my two nephews came walking up behind us, scaring the hell out of us. They saw the object and the strange men, and in a voice that can only a kid can project, screamed out loud, "What are those things?" That's when the creatures turned to notice us. The sight of these creatures was something that will haunt me till the day I die. They turned and looked right at us. Its eyes were large, almost like the eyes of a praying mantis, except they were jet black and wrapped around its head. The two creatures looked at us for about 7 seconds, not an ounce of movement, before they calmly walked around the craft, one right after the other. They disappeared behind the craft, and we never saw them again. A few seconds later, the craft lifts, not a sound coming from the object, no rush of wind, not even the swaying of the nearby branches of the mesquite tree. It rose quietly and hovered about 40 foot from the ground and shot out like a bat out of hell. As it zoomed away, it started glowing and made it easier to track as it zoomed away, getting higher and higher till it actually faded away. We stood there in complete silence as we tried to make heads and tails of what we had just seen. My brother finally piped up and said, "Should we call the police?" After which I burst out and laughed and replied to him and tell them what. My nephew looked like he had just seen the devil himself, which considering what we had just saw, I don't blame him. We didn't want to talk about it, and after we made our way back to the house, we didn't talk about it at all. I tried to ask him about it later, and he basically told me he didn't even want to think about it. He was still processing what had happened. So I was more than happy just to leave it at that. Now, I never really believed the subject of UFOs and aliens, but after the events of that night, I'm seriously going to reevaluate that belief. I know that I plan to keep my mind open and start looking up toward the sky a little bit more from now on. Thank you. Now, this next account, a New Mexico mail carrier is stranded in the desert after blowing a tire. Unable to get cell service, he hikes to an elevated area, and on his way, he encounters something best suited for a 1950s horror film. So he states to me, "I'm a mail carrier in Los Alamos, New Mexico. Folks here are spread out all over long distances, and they still need to get their mail. So every day I take that long drive out through the desert to deliver mail to the residents. Now, in February 2023, I was out by Valles Cadera National Preserve, and I blew a tire. It was late afternoon. It was going to be dark soon, so the desert gets cold at night year-round. Even worse, cell phone service is spotty around here. Now, my reception was nil. My only options were to wait for a car to pass and hope they were willing to help. I could also hike up the hill and try to get a signal. Eventually, after I didn't report back, the post office would send somebody out to find me along the highway. But that could literally take hours, and I didn't want to spend the night out there alone. So I chose to hike. I could probably make it up and back just before dark. I just hoped that I would get a signal once up on top of the hill. I was about halfway up the hill when I decided to take a short rest and a water break. I was sitting on a rock and taking a few sips of the bottle when I heard some odd sounds. It was like loud chattering. It reminded me of cicadas that I remembered when I was living in the eastern U.S. It seemed like it was coming from behind a rock outcropping directly in the path. I didn't see any other roots, so I decided to just move slowly and see what it was. Now, as I began to walk, I stepped on a loose rock and lost my footing. I slid down a few feet before catching myself. The chattering stopped, and I noticed something move out from behind a boulder. I saw a 6-foot-tall thin insectoid with the head of a grasshopper. It had 2 large antennae on its head and a pair of large pincers extending from its thorax. There was another small pair of pincers beneath that. It moved quickly left and then right and then left again, stopping 20 feet away. It was horrible. I didn't know if running and standing my ground was the best option, but after I took another look at its pincers, I decided on the former. I slowly backed away, mimicking its movements. It stood still as it watched me. Then my cell phone began to ring loudly. The creature's antenna snapped to attention, and it quickly ran down the hillside. I instantly ran to the opposite direction, stumbling and falling as I moved. I eventually reached the bottom of the hill near the roadside, not far from the mail truck. I hopped into the truck and staying put, hoping that the creature would stay away from me. I did catch a glimpse of the creature as it moved around the hill, but I stayed put in the truck for several hours, not daring to leave its safety. After what seemed like forever, a car came along and gave me a lift back into town. So what did I see? I have heard a lot of stories of strange creatures in the New Mexico desert, but this was almost impossible to imagine. Of course, I haven't mentioned this to anyone other than my girlfriend. So if there's anything I've learned over the years about New Mexico, it's to expect the unexpected. I have gotten a lot of strange sightings and encounters in New Mexico. So this next account, I may have talked about it a while back, but it kind of fits into what the subject tonight. A young Evanston, Illinois man is at a local self-storage facility. Now, while there, he hears banging sounds and eventually investigates. He encounters a white, fleshy, insect-like humanoid. So he states, I live in Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago. I was asked by my mother's friend to move some stuff to a storage unit nearby. I had not been working because of COVID and the pay was decent, so I went ahead and agreed. It was raining all day off and on, but at times it got so heavy that I couldn't transfer a box from my car to the unit. So I just get comfortable inside the unit and listen to some music while I wait for the rain to clear up. It's cozy in there, to be honest, and the rain just keeps getting worse. It's not very cold out, though. I'm just chilling when I start hearing this banging noise from nearby. It sounds like something hitting metal at first. I think that maybe there was a car accident on nearby highway, which is North Lincoln Avenue, Highway 41. But then I realized it was coming from the other direction, and I really didn't want to go outside and get wet. So I tell myself that someone probably dropped something, nothing serious. But I continued hearing various banging noises. I still didn't bother checking, but as it continued, I decided to check it out since the rain had just let up a bit. I walk outside and turn the corner and see this massive hole in the fence leading to a little wooded area in the North Shore Channel Trail. I see this white thing moving near and under the dumpster by the fence. I'm thinking that it was a large white garbage bag, but it just doesn't look right. I'm confused and I'm trying to get closer to this thing. Now, I may be about 100 foot away or so from it, and I see something sticking out of it and making a clicking sound. I say, hello, who's that? I immediately regretted yelling this out. Something big squeezes out from underneath the dumpster. It looks like a pile of fleshy tissue with spike-like protrusions. It stands 4 foot tall and then extends up to over 6 foot. It looked like a humanoid spider or other insect, but with white flesh. It doesn't have an exoskeleton, just smooth white flesh. The head is weird, kind of insect-like with no mouth that I could see. The eyes were human-like and had a reddish glow. It had long slits along the side of its head. It stood there clicking and watching me. I could sense that it didn't want me there. I was wondering why I was still there and hadn't run off, but I was frozen in place because I was terrified. Now, I had heard about the Chicago Mothman and was wondering if this may have been it, but it didn't resemble anything that I had ever heard about. Then I felt a sudden rush of calm come over me, and I was able to break the trance I was in. I hauled my ass back to the storage unit, locked it up, and got into the car and quickly left. When I looked back in the direction, the creature was gone. I returned the next day and finished unloading the boxes from the car as fast as I could. Now, this happened in the spring of 2020. I haven't told anyone about this. Now, I did talk to the witness, and his anxiety was really evident throughout the conversation. I truly believe he encountered something, but what it was, I have no idea. Now, a Canadian man is in Georgia Bay, Ontario, Canada, when he observes UFOs in a V formation. He then has an encounter with an insectoid mantis alien that supposedly saves his life. He writes, a certain event happened to me several years ago in the summer of 1970 in the Georgian Bay, Ontario, Canada region. Now, I believe the incident should be told. Other than my immediate family and a couple of close friends, I never told this story to anyone. It was around 2 a.m. and I saw in the northwestern sky 5 objects flying in a V formation towards the southeast. I had to tell myself that it was only a dream, but as the objects got closer, I realized what I was seeing was real. As the objects approached closer to me on the shoreline, I had the most amazing feeling that something or someone was trying to talk to me from them. At that exact moment, a voice or presence spoke clearly to me that I was in danger. No exaggeration here, a creature seemed to appear before me as if it was hovering over me. It stood about 8 to 9 foot tall, and it was exactly the appearance of what other witnesses have described as praying mantis with large, oily, black eyes. While this entity spoke to me by thought alone, I felt oddly at ease with it rather than terrified, for it seemed genuinely concerned for me. It told me that I was dying of a drug overdose and that I should seek medical help. My mind was totally clear at the moment with no effects from recreational drugs I regularly take. I knew that the entity was telling the truth, and I listened. What happened next was incredible. The entity spread out its long insect arms and wrapped them around the back of my head. Suddenly, I felt a jab like a needle in my brain, part of my medulla, actually. It totally was clear of thought and strong. I don't have any memories of what happened to the entity or the hovering objects. The next thing I knew, I was running from the beach to the highway to hitch a ride to the hospital, where I checked myself into the emergency ward. I had my stomach pumped and remained there for 3 days. My friend and families heard my story and just dismissed it, but what happened a few weeks later has disturbed me since the incident. People in the area where I live began phoning in reports of strange lights appearing over Georgian Bay, flying in V formation. Perhaps a month or so later, there was a report on the local radio of a secret underwater U.S. military base in the Georgian Bay off the shores of Mayford. An interesting note on this is that there is a Canadian military base on Mayford. For a week or two, this was the talk of the county, with people calling in the radio stations for more info, but the story was never repeated on air and seemed to just fade away. Now, this event has stuck in my head as clearly as day. It happens as time goes on. I hear similar stories being recounted by others. It can be extremely worrisome to experience this kind of event, and often we feel like nobody else seems to care or understand. But even if 100 UFOs should land on Parliament Hill tomorrow, we all must get up in the morning, feed ourselves, and carry on with our daily routines. Now, I no longer fear the unknown and embrace the beauty of this universal plane. Actually, that's very similar to some firsthand experiences accounts I've had with these mantis beings. There are many times where they're very oppressive and just don't seem to care. And then there are other times when they do reach out to help others. So what agenda they have, I have no idea. Now, an experiencer contacted me from San Diego, California, tells a terrifying insectoid encounter he had while camping in Sequoia National Forest. He states, I just want to share an experience I had about 2 years ago in Sequoia National Forest. My sister took my friend and me out there, and we were deep in the forest, far away from civilization. We were having a great time. Now, I'm a believer in the paranormal, Bigfoot, aliens, and all that stuff, but while I was there, I never had that thought. I was just there camping with my family, having a great time. At about 9 o'clock, everyone decided to go to sleep, and my friend and I were just left staring at the bonfire. I decided it was a good time to listen to music, so I went to my sister's 4Runner, and I opened the back to grab my iPod. And as I opened the back door, I heard something come out of the tree. Now, it didn't come out of the tree. It was almost as if it was holding it, and it fell. And I heard this huge thump. I could feel it. I looked over at the tree, and I heard the fall from. And I swear on my life, and I swear to God, I saw a 6 to 7 foot tall praying mantis. And as I laid eyes on it, I completely lost breath. I was completely taken aback. It took a step back, and then it became invisible. I couldn't believe what I saw. I slammed the door, and I ran back to the campfire. I alerted my friend. I woke everyone up, and no one would believe me. I was really upset because I knew what I had seen. So that happened, and my friend didn't believe me. He was laughing at me, and then suddenly I could hear all these things surrounding us. And finally, when I brought it to my friend's attention, he kind of put his ear to it, and he listened as well. Finally, I was patrolling the campground with my flashlight, and I could just hear these things surrounding us. And I heard this clicking sound. It was like, like snapping your fingers or using some type of unknown clicking sound, but I was scared. And that was the end of the account. Now, I don't know what to make of that. It could very well be some type of high order non-terrestrial insectoid or something. It just seems weird that they just showed up, and it didn't seem that they had any reason to be there. So it's kind of odd. Now, in this next account, a guy and his buddy are moving into a new place. They later notice a girl standing in the yard next door, but soon realize that she has black eyes. Then something occurs that totally freaks them out. He tells me, my story is from 1988. I was just moving out of the house for the first time. I moved to Crestline, California with a couple of buddies. This story involves my buddy Nate and myself. He was helping me move into my room, and by then we moved most of my things, and it was towards the end of the night, probably around 10 p.m. Now, my room faced the back of a slope of a hill. Right above the hill was another house, and there was no fences, so neighbors and kids I noticed throughout the day were playing and just going through the yard, no big deal. So when my buddy and I were in the room, we looked out the window and we saw a couple kids. And it was late at that time and very dark. The kids were just playing around, having a good time. So I go and get another beer for Nate, and when I get back, he says the kids went away. And there was just one girl left, and it's kind of weird. We're looking, trying to see if she was okay because she was just standing there, kind of just facing, I guess, east. When she started moving slowly, and we noticed that, I don't know if it was the moonlight or what, but her skin started becoming pale. Yeah, it was weird. She was dressed in normal clothes, Just at that time, she started to put her head up and started looking around. We didn't say anything because we were already freaked out, but then when she looked at us, her eyes were all black. Then maybe a couple seconds later, it was almost a reddish black, really weird. That freaked us out, and we slammed the window shut and put the blinds over it. And as we just peeked through the window to see what was there, it was almost as if it was, I don't know, like a skinwalker, but almost like the creature, like some people talk about the Men in Black. It was all quiet, but it wasn't a girl anymore. It was almost like a human-like body, but the arms and legs were almost double jointed, and it was walking in a very almost crab-like way. It was very weird. At that point, it was just screaming like crazy. We ran down the stairs, and we were trying to contemplate whether we should just get in the car. Now, we stayed inside for about an hour, and my buddy Nate and I were having anxiety through the roof. And at one point, Nate said, just screw it, let's get out of here. So we ran down through the deck, got in the car, and luckily the car wasn't automatic, the button, and you just press it, and it opens. Well, when we were backing up, you must go slow on the very tip where it goes onto the street from your driveway, or you'll scratch the back of the car. But at that point, we were going too fast. We went backward too fast, and when it hit the bottom of the tow hitch, it was so fast that the truck went back on it. And the front end went up, and we were vertical basically for maybe 30 seconds, freaking out. I kid you not. At that point, I was able to use my body weight to push the car forward. And when it went down forward, we looked down, and there was a creature right in front of us. We were just cold. It was humanoid, almost a human body, but no hair. But it was just pale creature, almost like an insect. Its arms and legs were both disjointed. It was the craziest thing. It was exactly what a praying mantis would look like, the arms and legs. Anyway. A Washington experiencer comes forward and describes her encounter at home with an insectoid extraterrestrial after reading my book, Alien Disclosure Experiences Expose Reality. Dear Mr. Strickler, wow, I really feel weird writing this email. I am a sensible 65-year-old woman. However, my daughter, grounded in all things she can see and touch, would tell you I have one of the most open minds she's ever run across. I do have more of a willingness to approach things with an open mind because of my own experiences. I found you quite by accident after getting one of your books through Kindle. And I thought how wonderful that people can reach out to you and tell you about their experiences without the fear of harsh judgment. Well, here goes. I had an experience in 1993 that has bothered me ever since. My husband was involved, but didn't see anything, though he was in the bed next to me. The only person I told was my personal physician the very next day. At the time, we lived in a 2-story house on a dead-end cul-de-sac in Seattle, Washington, about 5 miles from SeaTac Airport. It was sometime in late October, early November of 1993. It occurred in the middle of the night, about 2 a.m. My husband and I were asleep. I was on the side of the bed facing the outer bedroom wall, and my husband was asleep next to me. I woke up and rolled over, bringing the bedroom doorway into my view. The hall light was on outside of the bed, so I had a clear view of the doorway. I saw something standing in the bedroom doorway. It was very tall and got a vague outline of some kind of robe-like clothing. I sat straight up in bed, grabbed my husband's arm, and shook him, shouting, "There's something in the doorway." My husband bolted up out of bed and grabbed the baseball bat he kept next to the headboard. But as soon as he had shouted out, the thing was gone, just gone. I was nearly hysterical, and it took a while for my husband to calm me down. Now, I told him I had seen something in the doorway. He checked the house, but of course there was nothing there. Everything was locked up tight. I felt like I was losing my mind. I apologized for scaring him like that and waking him up yelling. I don't really remember anything about the rest of that night except that I was very upset and couldn't get back to sleep. I was very scared. I knew I'd seen something. Now, I didn't trust that I went back to sleep, it wouldn't come back. So the next morning, I phoned my doctor and left a message asking him to phone me back. I told him in the message that I thought there was something wrong with me. When he phoned me back, I broke down in tears, telling him that I felt like I was losing my mind. I told him that I knew I saw something in the bedroom doorway in the middle of the night. It was real. I had seen it, but nothing might have been there. He asked me what I had seen, and I told him it was a thing or a man or something. He said that if a person is under stress, and we had just started our business earlier that year, it was possible to be dreaming, but you're waking up and you think you see something. So he prescribed some medication for my nerves and told me I should try to forget that it ever happened. I was left with this feeling that I didn't really know what I had seen. It had happened so fast, I tried to forget that it happened, but of course I couldn't. So a few months later, I sat down at the table with a pencil and paper and tried to go back to the moment when I saw the thing in the doorway and just kind of let my mind float and draw what I'd seen. What I ended up with was bizarre and frightened me so badly that I just threw the drawing away and tried to forget about it. I had drawn an insect-like head with big eyes, a kind of robe outline, and an insect-like arms and hands coming out of the slits in the side of the robe. I can still close my eyes and see that thing in the doorway. Some details really stuck out with me, but others were so vague it's impossible to really describe them. I remember in detail two nub-like things on its head, but have only the vaguest sense of stalks or antenna coming from them. And I remember the way the arms looked, but can't really remember what the hands looked like or what they were doing. I remember the eyes, but only to remember an impression of two slits where the nose would have been, and I don't remember the mouth. I have only the vaguest sense of a robe or flowing cloth of sorts, but I remember the slits where the arm came out of. Now, over the years, I've had tried to convince myself that because of the vagueness of such details, it must have been real, but it still bothers me today, and I'm not sure that I still saw something. I have never had the nerve or desire to tell anyone else about the experience, and I don't want anyone to think I'm unstable. Even if I had wanted to tell someone about it, who would I tell? What good would it do? But I read your book, and that some people have described an insect or praying mantis-like being that they have seen. I hadn't heard about that before. It sent a volt of electricity through my body like an adrenaline rush, and I got butterflies in my stomach. Everyone knows about grays thanks to the movies. Never seen one, never want to, but if other people had seen the big insect thing, maybe there really was something in the doorway that night. If other people have seen this thing, maybe they will feel better if they know what they saw, even in just for a few seconds. Thank you for reading. I'm glad I finally got to tell someone about this. And I did call this lady, and we did talk for a long time. I think she saw something. I really do. She did seem very forthright and very sane to me. So who knows what it was. So that was the last account. So if you have questions, I will try to answer these. First of all, I want to thank Lala Bright for her donation, as well as Bear Zip for his $10 donation. Much appreciated, folks. Yeah, I appreciate the comments. I do try to talk to people, especially with experiencers, about these type of encounters. And many times it's after they read my book. And for those who haven't read the book, I have David's accounts in there, and I have a few other I've talked about over the years. Marla Snyder, do you get many insect reports from Pennsylvania? Please say no. I got a few. Yeah, I got a few. Yeah, we're not immune to it here in Pennsylvania, but I have had a few. Maybe you and I can talk about that sometime. Cryptids. Insectoid sightings are usually praying mantis. Any other insectoids? Yeah. Of course, the Mothman. We get others that look like, and I did mention that fleshy looking thing. The interesting thing about the insectoids that people see during abduction scenarios, and my thought on this is that these insectoids are actually metamorphosized reptilians. In other words, when they get to a certain status, they turn into these creatures, these insect-looking creatures, and that they're actually the overlords of the top dog of the group. David had talked about that to a small degree, and from other accounts I've received over the years, I think that may very well be true. So, I don't know, but, that's just my thought. Supigato, where is the biggest location for these type of encounters? Oh, they happen everywhere. I mean, I don't really have a specific area where people see them at. I'd say in most of the areas where there are just a lot of sightings or a lot of, we do get a lot of them in the West Coast and up in Pacific Northwest, down in Florida. We do get a lot of them in Canada too, especially in the BC area, in British Columbia. But British Columbia has a history of a lot of weird UFO and alien encounters. Sir Wolf, hi. When that guy had his stomach pumped, did they find drugs? I don't know. I really don't know. He never mentioned it. Cipagato, please no spider people. That's very few and far between. I have had a few, but nothing really of great interest, just mentions. One cat away from crazy midnight. Thanks, Lon. You never disappoint. How about a segment on Lake Lanier, spooky as Mulder? Lake Lanier, what state's that in? I probably know, but you can tell me. I'd appreciate it. Haunted Girl. Hi, friends. What are your thoughts on Tessany? I don't know what to say about that. Let's see. Oscom's Bob. Hello, Lon. Always a pleasure to see you, man. God bless you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we got a few new people in tonight. Thank you all for coming in. Yeah, what's a Tessany? Other people are asking. Georgia. Oh. So your question was, what are your thoughts on Georgia? I don't know. You're going to explain that a little more to me. I guess I'm a little thick, but I really don't know what you're talking about. Sorry about that. Anything else, folks? Any more questions? Now, for those people who follow me, I'm going to be, I'm scheduled to be on a couple of shows next week. Let's see. Let me just check my schedule real quick and so I can tell you what they were. Yeah, I'm on Jimmy Church next Tuesday night. I'm on his show. I haven't been on there in a while. So, and Wednesday, I'm going to be on Toll Radio with Doug Hychek and his son. And I am going to be talking with Ben Radford, who is well known as a skeptic. I think he and I are possibly going to be debating around about the Chicago Mothman phenomena. So that should be interesting. We'll see what happens with that. But if you have any suggestions for next Friday night's show, please rate me at Lon Strickler at phantomsandmonsters.com. Sometime either tomorrow or early Sunday, so I can get it all and go do my research and then pull stuff out of my archives. But again, I want to thank each and all of you for coming in, chatting, and donating, and it's really appreciated. If you do have a sighting or encounter, contact me at Lon Strickler, phantomsandmonsters.com. So I'm kind of glad I kind of looked out today. We had some really bad storms, and I'm glad I didn't lose anything. Oh, here we got another question. Haunted Girl. Recent info from the Vatican about not being alarmed if you start to see people's faces changing and seeing black shadows. I wrote about something the other day that I had never heard about, some type of demon-faced phenomena. Is that what you're talking about? Now, I know somebody in the Vatican had been talking about that. I don't know what that is. If you go back and check my blog from this week, you'll see me mention it. I don't know if it's an explanation for the black-eyed kids or black-eyed people or what it is, but that just seemed kind of strange. So, okay. Well, anyway, I want to thank you folks for coming in, and you have suggestions for next week's show, send it to me. And until then, you have a good weekend, stay safe, and talk to you soon. Bye.